Guys, welcome back. Today we are discussing the magnetism of sexual energy. For months now, I've discussed how the heart has the biggest electromagnetic field in the body, followed by the mind and its electrical impulses firing neurons all over the place. But did you know that the human sperm itself contains a charge? That's right. Even when we look at generators, there is a shaft inserted into a copper winding. However, when we start to look at the human reproductive system and we think in terms of electricity and we think in terms of how electricity is created, we start to see a very different lens. And for a man who practices semen retention, the reason they say it makes you magnetic is because there is a maturity stage of the semen itself. And the longer or more mature it becomes, the stronger that charge is. When we start to compare this to how the brain is pulling or has electrical impulses and the body is like fillings, magnetic pulling it down, but we are also connected to the root chakra, which is our base, our spine. And it is a very interesting travel that goes all the way back up that spinal cord into the brain. So there is a cycle every 29.5 days that is happening. Now, I've talked about some of this stuff many times in many different layers. So I want to really stay on magnetism itself because it's so interesting. As it turns out, there is a lot of unseen influences around us all the times. Think about it. Right now, there's Wi Fi signals in the air. There are cell phone signals, TV, satellite, and all kinds of other wireless transmissions floating around in the atmosphere. And this is very interesting because when I think about things of wireless energy being transmitted, I can only go back to Nikola Tesla. He was someone who practices celibacy. Not to mention, there were people like Muhammad Ali, Steve Jobs from Apple. There are so many of the well educated people of our lifetime, but it's not by books, it's not by curriculum. These inventors, these people who changed the course, these people who changed the course of our history all had one thing in common. They were able to magnetize their attention span and put it onto something that was able to further help humanity. Many of the people, especially like Nikola Tesla, really was a humanitarian. However, we all know how that story turned out. But the lessons that it can teach us, let's look at Napoleon Hill for just a minute. The sexual transmutation of energy in his book, Think and Grow Rich, he speaks about how diverting that energy into something meaningful and purposeful instead of like lustful intentions or uncontrolled desires that come from the lower natures of mankind. I find the parallels here very interesting because Napoleon Hill was another one of these practitioners. Neville Goddard speaks about magnetism, and he talks about how magnetism cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be witnessed and observed. So to become magnetic is to become just like the essence of magnetism. But it also helps you to understand the unseen influences. Because if you go all the way back to ancient Egypt, there were the knitters. These were the people who understood magnetism, and I would suppose to people that did not have any idea of what it was. It truly seemed like magic. Now, where do we derive that name magic from in the first place? Well, one of the clues that jumped out to me and has been a running theme on this channel is indeed the imagination. Now, the word imagination does contain the word magi, and it's very interesting that Neville Goddard himself has a book called The Awaken Imagination, where he speaks to Christ being the imagination. He also speaks to the Christ mind and the cardinal mind. I find this to be fascinating. All these great teachers were trying to show us something. Even Jesus, I do believe, was trying to show us something. But what is very interesting is I made this link a while back, but I did not put it in the semen retention video. But Mary Magdalene, when we look at cathedrals, cathode, we are looking at positive and negative charges. When we look at cymatics in these old cathedrals and churches, they have these stained glass windows in a cathedral, cathode. When we look at Egypt, we have the pyramids and they resonate at 33 hertz. There is numerology tied into all of this. Even the story of Jesus parallels the story of astrology of the sun in the sky. Even when you look at the sun, you get an increase in serotonin, which stabilizes your mood, which stabilizes your emotions. So much of this happens because of electromagnetism, the unseen forces and influences. I find something to be very interesting when we start to take words and we look at how words can be contained with inside of words, and we look at how the English language in general has hidden letters, or not hidden letters, but they have letters that are stuck into words that are silent. Knife, knife. This is the most obvious of them all. But when we start to think about a positive sentence or a negative sentence, and we think about that in our self talk, what does that have to do with the sexual energy? I am this, I am that, I am good, I am bad, I am a failure, I am very confident. So the direction of the sentence can either be a positive sentence or a negative sentence. And then when we get into things like homophones, where words sound the same through the ears, but they are spelled different. I think the largest sleight of hand here that really jumps out to me and has been for some time is the simple change in the word sun, sun, son. So if you want to understand what it means to be magnetic sexually, it's not about how many women you can sleep with or how many men you can get with. When you start to create that charge within the body, you start to become magnetic. You increase the body charge. And when we start to understand positive influence and flow with our thoughts, we can have thoughts that are positive, we can have thoughts that are negative, and then we can be neutral. All of this really depends on how we start to charge the body. Electricity is neither good or bad, right? I heard William Donahue say this: if you let him go wire his house, he could burn your house down. In that case, electricity is bad. But if you hired a professional to go wire your house, electricity is good. And then they say, well, why would God create something that's bad? What is electricity? It is something that is a force of nature, which comes in the form of Mother Earth. When I start to look at religion, especially in like modern Western Christianity, there is no mother figure. And if we look at positivity or polarity within the magnetic fields, there is positive, there is negative. One is considered male, one is considered female. When the sunlight pulls up plants out of the soul, where is the soul in Mother Earth? The sun is given structure by pulling it up. So when we start to increase our charge inside of the body through the reproductive system, that's phallic. Where we enter into the portal, it becomes like a generator. It generates life, especially if we lose our fluid and the conception happens. I'm trying to be YouTube friendly here, guys, so you have to read between the lines. But when we start to see the symbolism of some of this stuff, we look at the Egyptian Ankh. It's quite amazing how the symbology of all this, the Ankh really symbolizes the male and the female in union coming together. We can also see how the cross, compared to the Ankh, is two male aspects. This further reaffirms to me when I start to look at stuff that there is something really wrong with how modern Christianity views things. If we have no mother figure, then how can we heal the wounds of mother? Sure, many churches practice Mother's Day and all these type festivals and things. But when it comes to the nurturing aspect in the psyche, the human psychology of things, in certain circles of these different religious groups, we start to understand that there indeed is something missing. And when we start to look at the landscape of our society, there are so many men that have grew up without fathers in the home. This forced women to raise the kids in a system where in religion there is no mother figure, unless you go and look at Catholicism. Again, it makes me think about the cathode on these cathedrals. So, electromagnetism is everywhere. And I will show you something else, the unseen influences. One day, I was looking at magnets and the fields that it creates. I also came across an image of Mecca. And I immediately drew the link in my mind. So the next thing, the most logical thing to do was to open up Adobe and put the two images side by side. Take a look for yourself. You decide for yourself. What do you think this image is trying to show us? It's not just a coincidence that these two images strike a very similar mental picture in your mind. The Mecca and the black box or the um what do you want to call it? I'll let you decide. Focus and attention is being magnetized onto that. Much like the magnet has created a field around it. And when I started to look at this, I came across a picture recently of a stadium with a giant cross in the middle. And all these people in the stadium are looking down, focusing right onto that cross. Their attention, all of their energy in their body is being directed and focused right onto that cross. Now, this is called entertainment to entrap someone's attention. And once you learn how these dynamics are working and influencing you, you could take your power back. And the more magnetic you become inside of yourself, the more you start to have an unseen influence on things around you. The more magnetized you become, the more influential you are. Think about Nikola Tesla. Think about Steve Jobs. Think about Muhammad Ali. Think about all these greats that came before us that actually left their mark on this world and their name is remembered. Napoleon Hill, Neville Goddard. The list goes on and on. There are some things that you can do to help your body. Stay hydrated. Make sure that you have a proper diet. But most importantly, you have to um, stop ejaculating. Really, seriously, porn is probably one of the worst things because it tempts the mind into releasing by digital images that are not even real, further proving that the mind cannot distinguish what is real and what is fake. And I will also give you another clue. Our visual field can be influenced by magnetism. When we start to look at that blue and red shift that I've talked about so many times on this channel, it is a magnetic field in there. And when we start to polarize our thoughts and our emotions in synchronicity, we start to see synchronicity in our visual fields. We start to notice things that were not there before, or were they? So if that is the case, then just as you could take an etch a sketch and shake the image and start over, a distorted image could likely be caused by interference of negativity. People with bad self talk coming around you, emotionally dumping on you. Those are things that you must learn to become aware of. Some things you can't change, some things you can, but most definitely you can change what is in you by starting a different self talk, telling yourself a different story. Stop worrying about failure if you are on this practice. That is probably one of the worst things you can do. I learned this because it's been 3 years of it. If you start to worry, what if I fail? What if I fail? What if I fail? What is the signal that is coming out of your brain telling your body? You are in a fear of failure. That will change the chemistry, that will change the charge in the body. And then it will ultimately start to affect the semen in your fruit. Yes, the fruit from your tree of life. Your inner tree of life is your nervous system. That is the electrical conductor of the body. Then you have the flesh, which is another aspect of the body. You have the soul or spirit, ever how you want to describe it. But then you have the mentality of things. We also have the pineal gland. This is a major component of magnetism inside of the human body. As it turns out, the pineal gland can pick up on subtle electromagnetic fields. It can also become very calcified. And think about this for just a minute. If you have clear vision, then likely you can see with mental clarity, the mental eye of the mind, where both of these hemispheres are able to communicate across both of the hemispheres clearly. However, if your pineal gland becomes distorted and the electrical impulses are trying to fire across it, then you could have a distorted mental image. It's like having cataracts on your eyes, except for it is in the pineal gland. Now, if anyone knows a lot about the pineal gland, then you would know that there are tiny microcrystals inside of that pineal gland. And when they vibrate, they are releasing energy. This is very important when it comes to semen retention. Once you start to go through this cycle for at least 1 or 2 months, you start to really see some of these benefits. It is hard to see when you're so far away from it, but I can promise you that once you start to decalcify, open your third eye, so to speak, you will start to naturally gravitate towards things that are more natural than fast food, greasy food, junk food, a lot of sodas and sugars in your diet. You start to become more in align with what is in nature. And what I found out was during this 3 years of practice, it's not always so much about not releasing as how long you should go, but it is learning about the chemistry within the body. It starts to purify your blood. And by this is what we see in outside tradition as washed by the blood of Jesus. We see as theater a crown of thorns around his head. But when we start to practice and we go through that 29.5-day cycle and we continue to do this for a little while, we are starting to increase the charge that is in our fruit. You shall know them by their fruit, their labors. What kind of work and purpose are they doing in their lives? Are they talkers? Are they hearers? Or are they doers? This is what I mean. You look at Steve Jobs again. You look at Muhammad Ali, Nikola Tesla. All the greats were doing something very purposeful with their lives. Now, when we start to practice this and that fluid starts to move inside of the body, the signal's getting stronger. And I'll tell you something else. The signal from the sunlight that increases the serotonin, that also increases the cellular signaling from one cell to the next. So we are getting energy, we are getting protons from the sunlight. And yes, you can actually sun gaze, and that light goes into that black hole. Now, get this, when we are talking about magnetism, everything that is happening in the outside universe is a direct reflection of everything inward. Let me explain. You could think about black holes in space, how light can enter into it and never escape. Well, you could take that same parable and put it to the human eye. Light goes into the human eye through the black hole. Once it goes in, it becomes matter. It is converted into matter. That light has gone in and it will never leave. What is on the other side of a black hole? It is you, your first person view. You are the black hole. I know it. It's crazy, right? You are the black hole. Think about this logically. You are the black hole. Light comes in and it converts itself into matter into your body. And the more you get sunlight into your eyes, the more you increase the signals, the more you increase the charge, and the more that you stay on the practice of semen retention, you are also increasing the charge down below in those fruits. And eventually, once it travels up those 33 vertebrates back up into your head and it makes its way to the pituitary gland where the chemistry is happening, we get electrification of the biochemistry. This is the electricity coming together with the physical matter internally, the internal energy production or generation of mental pictures, imagination, as we have come to know it, is very, very fascinating. I mean, I get so excited thinking about this, guys. Imagination, magic, magi, magnets, magic, Magdalene, magnesium. I think of all the words that begin with MAG that could even be put in a basket that is have something to do with magnetism. When we pick up a magnifying glass, it increases the image, right? This taught me about those focal points I was speaking about earlier. We can become so zoomed in, we are polarized onto an idea. An idea is nothing more than a mental picture that we have built in our head. I have this idea that I want something, right? This is where we start to really get into the area of the unseen influences because our attention span can go out there in the world and then we stay too long and we get too far away from ourselves. This is why we start to lose ourselves, lose sight of self. We forget who we are. We start to focus on things. And the more we focus on it, guess what? Our emotions are going to flow in that direction. Again, I take this back to self talk. If I'm trying to describe to you an image, I have to use words to build it. And if I am not able to build the image with good language, then there is no bridge to really create that image on a solid foundation. What do I mean? We have logical thinking and then we have the creative emotional thinking. So when we start to mix words that are logical and emotional, I think, I feel, I think, I feel, I think. Some people are indeed thinkers. Some people are fillers. The idea here is to balance out I think and I feel, to find equilibrium between the two hemispheres of the mind. This is the horizon of the body. We also have the up and down axis. So when we start to overthink, we start to get in the left brain too much. We start to shut the door on the right side. You lose creativity. You lose the feelings of having enough energy to do what it is that you want to do. If we start to ejaculate too much, we start to drain the body's natural resources to regenerate blood in the brain. Again, guys, let's talk about the pineal gland a little bit more. That pineal gland is releasing energy. If our chemistry is more in a balance, when that electricity hits those chemicals, we create plasma. You can see this in Nikola Tesla's work. The Tesla Coil is a prime example of this. It is just like a light bulb or the firmament or filament of a light bulb. Firmament. That makes me think about how the body is indeed full of 80% water. And what is inside is separated from the outside. And now let me share with you something else. Since we are talking about magnetism and we are talking about the charge of semen, we are talking about the heart space being the biggest electromagnetic field in the body. And then the brain has its own. But what does it mean when we talk about mysticism? We know that water can transform its properties. It is still water. It can be a solid as ice. It can be a fluid as water. It can become a vapor. And have you ever turned on the news and heard a anchor say, "It is a bit misty outside today"? This, in my mind, makes me think about mysticism because some people can't see the hidden influences much in the way that magnetism works. So if that is the case, then mysticism, it is a misty day. Air, ether, contains a static charge, and water is always transforming. It is ascending and descending, and it transforms from a solid, a liquid, into a vapor, and it comes back down as rain. This really does highlight the symbology of the body. The fluid is always traveling up and then it's going back down. It's traveling back up and it's going back down. If you ever notice on the moon cycles, a lot of times we will get some rain around a full moon. Not always, but it has happened a lot here in North Carolina. The symbology of the sun and the moon is very interesting here because when we talk about semen retention, the Son is something that is a central figure. And it's not just Jesus Christ. We think about the last name an awful lot here because we have the Christ, oh, the Christos, and the understanding of that sacred oil, that anointed oil, that once it is returned, we get the washing of the blood. We get new blood, we get new life. So semen retention makes you magnetic, but it also makes you supercharged, and you can start to have an arousal for life and be full of creative ideas, be full of so much energy that you'll be running circles around people and they will be frustrated with you. But there's nothing that you can do about that because that is the effects and the influence that semen retention has. Now, I think back on how generators work, right? We have copper wire that's in a oval, ovaries, and then we have a shaft that enters in, and then there is a field that is generated. Perhaps the men that were not out depleting themselves understood this through the mental pictures in their imagination, the internal workings of the mind. That's how I started to understand it, to be honest. I sat down here for months and I was like, just this unraveling of so many mysteries that I never understood until I started to get mental clarity. I started to understand the cycles, the chemistry, and even self talk. I started to understand why there is always a trinity in everything. It's very interesting that electricity itself has a trinity: positive, negative, neutral. We have the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. But where is the mother in all of this? Because the father plants the seed and mother grows the fruit. Cathode, electricity. Magnets, magnification, focal points. If we zoom in too much onto something, we create a tunnel vision. And that tunnel vision starts to starts to cut out everything in the wider visual field. So if we start to zoom out, we start to get a bigger picture. Much how you could stand at the base of a skyscraper and it's hard to take in the sheer size of it until you back away, you zoom out. So, to gain a broader picture of things, sometimes you have to step away, you have to step back and really understand what's going on. So, magnetism itself can teach us more than just being magnetic, it can teach us the laws of nature. It can teach us about unseen influences. And let me stop right here for just a minute. That English language, how I spoke about a while ago, we can have a good positive sentence, a bad sentence. But one of the things that English language has is those hidden letters, and it has these weird homophones, right? Where words sound the same, but they're spelled different. And I do believe deep down in my heart that somewhere this was intentional. I'm not going to go as far as saying evil because that's in the past and I don't hold any ill will towards things of the past. I learn now in the present so it can help me in the future. So, what I started to understand with this was the word flu is contained inside of the word influence. And when I was thinking about electromagnetic fields and I was thinking about the history of America, for example, and wireless transmission. It was around the time of Nikola Tesla creating wireless energy, right? And then for some reason, you couldn't put a meter on it, you couldn't charge for electricity, and therefore we had to end all of his work on wireless transmissions. Not too long after that, we have the Spanish flu. We have influenzas starting to happen. And as it turns out, when we look at electromagnetism, there is those fields that we can't see that are outside of the visual range that the human eyes can physically see. So those unseen influences, if people back then, 200 years ago, were playing with wireless energy, they could have been creating unseen influences on people around them, causing radio sickness. I know this because my grandpa used to work on AM towers. And when you start to look at AM radio, if I'm not mistaken, it was very high voltage, but the distance it could travel was very short. So, over the many years, they have been refining and defining this process. There's a lot of stories when you start to look at AM radio where I believe there was one man that took a wrench and went near one of the guide cables and started to pick up the electricity that was coming off that tower. There are stories of people having lead fillings in their mouth, getting too close to certain signals, and hearing voices in their head because that filament was picking up the radio station through the magnetism, the electromagnetic field. So, influence, electromagnetism. We do indeed have the visual field that can be affected by that same unseen influence. We talk about energy and we talk about emotions being one and the same. If I start to focus on me being a bad person, how am I going to start to feel about myself? I'm going to start to feel in alignment with what I say I am. This takes me back to Neville Goddard saying, is it not better for a man to say, I am strong, than to say, I will be? Because I will be implies that you are not now in the present. So, guys, learning how to fix your self talk and stay on this journey of semen retention will give you enormous amounts of energy, will start to unleash your creative potentials. It will start to increase your mental clarity and give you mental vision that will help you in your life. You will start to have a more purposeful meaning in life, start to have a more balanced emotional state. And who doesn't want that? So, for me, I will tell you a few things that I've done personally on this journey. I sun gaze. Anytime I have an opportunity, not so much in the broad day, but early morning, late evening, right before the sun goes down, I try to get a few minutes of sunlight. I don't I don't spend a lot of time some days. It's just a few minutes every day, morning and night. I'll tell you something else. Those golden and yellow hues in the sky actually are sending signal to your brain to adjust the chemistry. This is the melatonin production. This is serotonin production. This is the cycles of wake and sleep. This goes all the way back to Egypt with the eye of Ra and the eye of Horus. Horus standing for hormones, hours of the day, cycles. And the sun is a disk, meaning a pi, Pisces, radius, diameter. This is how we started to understand the compass and the square and the mastering of inner self. It was just a few years ago I seen the number 38 flash on my screen 5 times one day. I've told this story before, but it's worth repeating because when you look at the angel number 38, you will start to find information about the ascended masters. These are people like Jesus, Gandhi, and Krishna from India. These are known as beings that have become enlightened. If the eye be single, the body shall be full of light. What does that mean? Guys, we see the all-seeing eye everywhere, right? Let's just make an example of that right now. You got one eye, two eye, and then the mental eye of the mind. And when we start to decalcify the pineal gland and we start to strengthen that energy within the body, and we are starting to get more sunlight into those black holes, we start to fill the body with light. Does the night sky light up when a thunderbolt strikes? Yes, indeed, it does. So, does that mean if you are strengthening the signals to the brain that the electrical impulses become brighter, they become stronger, and they are increased because of serotonin and a chemistry balance or rebalancing in the body? Would that not make you more magnetic? Would that make you have more arousal for life in general? Not just in a sexual way, not just in a lustful way, but a complete arousal for life where helping people makes you feel good. Yes, guys, I will tell you firsthand, dealing with the actual physical arousal, now that is something else. This is where the primal urges of the body can start to really influence you, right? Suppose, for example, just for the sake of example, you have been 3 or 4 months celibate and you find yourself in close proximity with another woman. Yes, you can start to pick up on those subtle influences. And yes, your body can start to talk to you. Hey, I'm very excited. Hey, I'm very excited. And if you're not careful, you can find yourself having a slip up. But if you can refrain from that, you can also understand that it is completely natural. And there is nothing in the world that you can do to change it. If you get an erection because you're around a woman and you're not in a relationship and you're not chasing after her, you're not trying to sleep with her, you're just in a close proximity and it happens. Guys, I will be honest with you. There was a time in my life where I didn't know how to handle that mentally. I didn't know what to do with it emotionally. If I got aroused by being around someone, I just kept it to myself. I didn't talk about it. I didn't act on it. But internally, I felt shame because of it. It's like going and getting your hair cut and getting aroused in an inappropriate way, but is also natural, and then you shame yourself internally for it. These are the kind of things that once you go onto the journey and start to understand magnetism and you start to understand natural law and you start to forgive yourself and forget about things like this and allow the energy to flow through you. Because I will tell you something else. When it comes to sexual creative magnetic energy, when a two positive forces come together, they amplify each other and expand. So it's quite okay to allow natural urges to happen as long as our intentions are purposeful, meaningful, and it is what it is, guys. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't stop it from happening. It is when we overuse that magical wand of ours that we start to deplete ourselves. Then we start lusting. And because we have no energy, we lust after something on the outside of us to fill us internally. And this starts to lead to the types of relationships where they are fast moving, they burn hot at first, but they don't have anything to continue. They burn out quickly. You lose interest quickly. Why? Because you can't focus where there is no energy. Where your focus goes, your energy flows. And if there is nothing energetic there, then there is nothing for you to focus on. This is the slippery slope of lust. Now you're looking over here. Now you're looking over there. This is how we come to the understanding of what an energy vampire is. Basically, someone that is going to drain you and leave you, drain you and leave you. It's true, guys. Very true. But the generator, when I was looking at the nervous system itself, again, let's go back to blue and red shift. We have that in our visual field. It is influenced by magnetism, but the nervous system in itself is connected right at the pineal gland. There's your triangle again. So, if we understand the spiral effect of a magnetic field, when I looked at this, I could see it in my head, but even putting it on a graphic was only a 2D image. What I was seeing in my imagination was very real, very vivid. This taught me about torus fields. We understand that positive pole and that oval, the binary code of things. One is male, O or zero is female. We enter the shaft into the oval, or in real life, we would penetrate a woman. I hope I could say this on YouTube, and we could impregnate her. There is that chemical exchange. There is that flash of light at the moment of conception, the Big Bang, if you want to call it that, the moment of conception, boom, zinc and magnesium are released, and the conception has taken place. And then what follows is 9 months or 10 months of pregnancy, of that new life being suspended in the waters, like a firmament separated from the waters of the waters. The black hole analogy, it's all right there inside of the human body. Electricity, those electrical impulses, is what animates the body. We would not be able to move without desire. So, desire sends the signal to do what? To the muscle to tense up and relax, tense up and relax. So, electricity is part of consciousness. Water is able to take shape, it brings life. Air fills our lungs, it has that static charge within it. Our semen has a static charge within it, including women. They have their own fields of electromagnetism. And that is very interesting. When two people become supercharged, their magnetism becomes even stronger. And when they come together in that same type creative expansion, there's nothing that can stop them. So it's very worth the practice, even if it's not for the rest of your life. For a few years of like really dedication, commitment to the practice will change your destiny. The imagination and the mental pictures, you gain more clarity. You're a magi is three. It becomes more wise. Those mental pictures become more vivid. You're able to build more in depth. And then one of the other side effects is the language that you are speaking starts to change. You start to articulate things better. You start to communicate better, and you start to speak more clearly. You start to remove out certain words in your language. You start to filter out the I cannots and replace them with I cans. The impossible becomes possible. The I am this, I am that starts to shift, and the magnet effect of pulling that down into the body starts to feed back in that loop of correspondence. Same with the chemistry and the different hormones in the body. It's absolutely, truly amazing. So, I want to leave you guys with one other thing. When it comes to magnetism, I want to talk about sound. This goes back to the words and the hidden meanings behind some of them, or the silent letters. When we look at cymatics, it allows us to see sound. So the vibration and the tone, if we want the match of the resonant energy in the body, we need to have a harmonic tone. So that creates an expansion instead of something that detracts. That is, if we use the analogy of positive self-talk or negative self-talk, that's what I'm talking about here. When we look at A432, for example, which is very interesting, that our standard here in the United States is A440. When we look at the cymatics of this, A440 is distorted. And we understand that the hums that we get from electrical fields, have you ever been around a high voltage line and you hear the humming? There is something known as the hums disease. People have been known to get sick. This also goes back to me saying that the AM radios in the early 1900s, late 1800s, influenza, flu, the word that is contained within it. So cymatics helps us to understand What words carry a harmonic resonance and what doesn't? So, with that being said, I'm going to strike this. If we think about the law of vibration, if you've seen examples of this before, if there was another tuning fork in this room that was a 432 hertz tuning fork, it would start to vibrate also, even though there is nothing around it. So that sound has traveled through the air, the ether, and reached the other tuning fork and caused a matching frequency of resonance. And if there was not another one, let's say there was a different tuned fork in here, it would just pass right through it. This really highlighted something to me when it came to energy projection, when it came to energy in people's body, when it came to proximity of other people. Let's say, for example, a positive person gets around a extremely negative. Let's just call it a negative Nelly. At some point, that negative Nelly starts to bring down the positive person because energy is trying to find balance. And this is where we start to understand that people who have weak boundaries are highly empathetic or empaths. This is not saying an empathic person is bad. It's just saying that they have a weak energy field because they are constantly reading and picking up on everyone's emotions around them. They have a lot of empathy because they can feel what other people feel, but that is a two-sided slope, isn't it? On the one hand, you can sympathize with other people. On the other hand, you can start to give your power away. And then at some point, the empath realizes what is happening, realizes that energy vampire is taking advantage of them. And then this is what happens when a supernova, a supernova of an empath, when that empath finally has enough of the emotional dumping, the negative charges, the draining of them, and they start to create this internal combustion within them, an explosion happens, and their boundaries get pushed outward. I've had enough. I'm going to my place of solitude. I need my peace. I need my quiet. And this is a dynamic that you can find and witness playing out all over the place. The empathic and narcissist paradigm. Not saying that everybody's good or everybody's bad in these type situations. It's just a simple observation that you can witness for yourself. So, magnetism and semen is something worth the practice because it totally changed my life. And if you're curious enough, you can look at my YouTube channel all the way back to the beginning of me posting these videos back in 2023. That was around the time that I started this practice. Now, I can tell you that I did have one episode where I had such a release that I laughed for almost 30 minutes. It was just this stomach hurting laughter and an explosion of, I can only assume oxytocin or something, where I felt euphoric for hours afterwards. And that was enough for me to commit to this journey. Because let's face it, if you have been overusing your wand for too long, then you won't experience those levels of orgasmic releases. So the practice itself changed my life, but that one experience of bliss was enough to get me started on this journey seriously, like to take it serious. And it's done its job. So 3 years later, I want to share with you all that, the journey does really change you. It changes you internally because of the chemical makeup, because of the electrical voltage in the body, the vibration in the body. But one of the biggest things it teaches you is discipline. It teaches you um, to not give up on yourself and that you are worth more than you truly know. And that when you start conserving that seed and that fluid, instead of wasting it on different things like porn or just um, cheap connections, is the best way I know how to put it. You reap the benefits, no one else. I mean, does a sock get the benefits if it's porn? Does a $5 hooker get the benefits if that's the case? Seriously, I mean, why would you do that to yourself once you have that knowledge, once you know better? So do better. And the awareness will increase. The imagination becomes clearer. Even how you hear things changes. And the electromagnetic field of the visual field starts to change. You will start to see the unseen. You will start to see the impossible become possible. And with that, guys, I'll see you on the next one.